Is the European Union losing its grip as BRICS extends its influence from the Balkans to the Bosphorus? A new world order appears to be taking shape, one that could shift the balance of global power. In today's report, we'll explore how the BRICS alliance is reshaping geopolitics, the European Union's internal struggles, and what this means for the future of global governance. Welcome to Pulse Line Reports, your source for the most impactful stories shaping our world today. BRICS, a name once associated solely with emerging economies, has now become a serious player on the global stage. Formed in 2006, the group brought together five major nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But BRICS is no longer just a block of growing economies. Today, it stands as a geopolitical force, directly challenging the Western-dominated world order. Together, BRICS countries account for over 40% of the global population and nearly a quarter of the world's GDP. They control significant shares of global resources, 51% of the world's natural gas reserves, and nearly half of its oil supplies. This economic power has allowed BRICS to grow beyond its initial framework, aiming to reshape the global financial system and reduce dependence on Western institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. But beyond economics, BRICS has also become a political alliance. The organization offers a platform for countries looking for alternatives to Western-led governance models. In an era of shifting allegiances, the BRICS alliance is becoming a magnet for nations seeking to diversify their partnerships. Nations like Cuba, Serbia, Turkey, and Hungary, all of which are showing increasing interest in this expanding bloc. This year, BRICS made headlines with its largest expansion in years. For the first time since South Africa joined in 2010, the bloc welcomed new members: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. Each of these countries brings new economic and geopolitical strengths to the table. For Egypt and Ethiopia, it's an opportunity to collaborate on infrastructure and trade, gaining access to financial support that doesn't come with the political strings often attached to Western aid. Iran, long isolated by Western sanctions, now sees BRICS as a way to re-enter global markets. Meanwhile, the UAE brings immense financial power and a strategic position between Asia and Europe, further solidifying BRICS' global reach. And the interest doesn't stop there. Even countries like Cuba are requesting partnership status, signaling that BRICS' influence stretches far beyond its original core members. As the bloc continues to grow, its potential to challenge Western dominance becomes ever more apparent. Let's now turn our attention to Serbia, a country once seen as a hopeful candidate for European Union membership. Serbia's road to EU accession has been long and complicated. Although many Serbian citizens saw EU membership as a way to integrate with the West and strengthen the economy, recent developments suggest a shift in strategic priorities. Serbian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Vulin recently expressed serious doubts about the country's future in the European Union, stating there is no place for Serbia in the EU. His remarks signal that Serbia is increasingly looking eastward, with BRICS presenting a new and attractive alternative. Why this change? Vulin points out that unlike the EU, BRICS does not impose strict political conditions on its members. While EU membership requires comprehensive reforms, ranging from governance to human rights, BRICS offers economic cooperation without such demands. Serbia's military neutrality, its close ties to Russia, and its desire for greater economic independence make BRICS a natural ally in this context. The economic potential is another major factor. Serbia could benefit from BRICS' vast control of global energy resources and its expanding trade networks. Vulin emphasized that BRICS nations control over half of the world's gas and oil reserves, powerful leverage in today's energy-driven economy. Serbia isn't the only European country exploring alternatives to the EU. Turkey, a long-standing candidate for EU membership, is also turning its gaze toward BRICS. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan recently reiterated Turkey's interest in the alliance, signaling that the country is open to new partnerships. Turkey's frustrations with the EU are well documented. Despite decades of negotiations, Turkey's accession process has stalled, largely due to concerns over human rights, democracy, and regional conflicts. According to Fidan, if Turkey had achieved full EU membership by now, The search for alternatives like BRICS might not have been necessary. However, Turkey's economic needs and geopolitical interests are pushing it to consider closer ties with BRICS. Economically, BRICS could offer Turkey access to new markets, investment opportunities, and technology transfers. Geopolitically, the alliance allows Turkey to balance its relationships between the West and the East, enhancing its global standing without sacrificing its connections to NATO or the EU. This delicate balancing act is crucial for a country that straddles two continents and has ambitions to be a major regional power. In Hungary, the shift toward BRICS is even more pronounced. Hungary, a member of the European Union, has found itself increasingly at odds with Brussels on a range of issues, from rule of law to democracy. Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government has faced criticism from the EU for its domestic policies, leading to sanctions and even the freezing of EU funds. Orban, however, has doubled down on his defiance, seeking closer ties with Russia and China. Hungary has secured long-term energy deals with Russia, bypassing EU sanctions, and it is a key player in China's Belt and Road Initiative. Orban recently praised BRICS for its openness to new members, contrasting this with the EU's reluctance to expand. As a result, Hungary has become an enthusiastic participant in BRICS forums, signaling its desire to explore deeper cooperation with the bloc. For Hungary, aligning with BRICS is about more than just economics. It's a way to assert its sovereignty and push back against what Orban sees as undue interference from Brussels. With access to BRICS financial institutions and markets, Hungary hopes to diversify its economic ties and reduce its reliance on Western-controlled financial systems. These shifts have sent shockwaves through the European Union, with countries like Serbia and Turkey rethinking their paths to EU membership, and even Hungary, an EU member, turning toward BRICS. Brussels is facing an unprecedented challenge. The EU's model of integration, based on strict political and economic reforms, is being tested as countries look for more flexible alternatives. The slow and bureaucratic process of EU accession has left many countries frustrated. For nations like Serbia, which have been in talks for over a decade, BRICS offers a more immediate and attractive option. And for EU members like Hungary, BRICS represents an escape route from the EU's political and legal constraints. So what does this all mean for the world? As BRICS expands and nations pivot toward this emerging alliance, the global order is shifting. Once dominated by Western institutions like NATO, the World Bank, and the IMF, the geopolitical landscape is becoming more multipolar. BRICS offers an alternative path, not just for emerging economies, but for any country seeking to reduce its dependence on the West. With initiatives like the New Development Bank and efforts to create alternatives to the U.S.-dominated SWIFT payment system, BRICS is positioning itself as a serious contender in global finance. For countries like Hungary and Serbia, this could mean new opportunities for investment, trade, and development without the political strings attached to Western financial aid. Energy dominance, Russia's gas exports and Brazil's oil production challenge G7 nations, particularly Europe, which depends on energy imports, making it vulnerable to disruptions, as seen during the Ukraine war. Manufacturing competition, China, the manufacturing powerhouse of BRICS, has overtaken G7 economies in industrial output, exporting goods from electronics to heavy machinery at prices that undercut Western producers. This has caused trade disputes, particularly with the United States and the EU, who accuse China of unfair trade practices. Agriculture. Brazil's agricultural exports, particularly soybeans, sugar, and beef, dominate global markets, competing directly with G7 countries like the US and Canada. This led to trade tensions, especially in food markets and tariffs. One of the most significant battlegrounds in the BRICS versus G7 rivalry is in global finance. For decades, the US dollar has been the dominant currency for international trade and finance. Institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, largely influenced by G7 countries, have set the rules for global financial flows. But BRICS nations are challenging this dominance by creating their own financial systems and alternatives to Western-controlled institutions. Alternative financial institutions. The New Development Bank, NDB, established by BRICS, serves as an alternative to the IMF and World Bank, offering loans to developing countries without the stringent political conditions imposed by Western institutions. This has created friction as BRICS is seen as drawing countries away from the Western financial order, especially in Africa and Latin America. Currency rivalry. BRICS is actively exploring alternatives to the US dollar in international trade. Russia and China in particular are promoting the use of local currencies in trade agreements with BRICS and non-BRICS countries. This threatens the dollar's hegemony, with China leading the way in pushing for digital currencies and systems that bypass US-led financial networks like SWIFT. Investment competition. G7 countries, through the World Bank and IMF, have traditionally dominated infrastructure investments in developing regions. However, China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, has become a direct competitor, offering massive infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, undermining Western influence in these regions. Global trade has become another arena where BRICS and G7 economies are in direct competition. In recent years, tensions have escalated into full-blown trade wars, with tariffs and sanctions being deployed as tools of economic rivalry. At the center of these disputes are China's growing dominance in manufacturing, Brazil's control over key agricultural exports, and Russia's critical role in global energy supplies. China versus U.S. trade war. The most prominent trade war in recent years has been between the United States and China. Washington has imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, accusing Beijing of unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and currency manipulation. China has retaliated with its own tariffs on U.S. goods, including agriculture, manufacturing, and technology. EU versus Russia, energy and sanctions. The European Union, particularly Germany, has been locked in a complex economic rivalry with Russia over energy. The EU's dependence on Russian gas has been a key vulnerability, leading to tensions over sanctions, particularly following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia has used its gas exports as leverage, further deepening the divide between Moscow and Brussels. Brazil versus US and EU, agricultural exports. Brazil, a major exporter of soybeans, beef, and sugar, has increasingly dominated global agricultural markets, challenging the US and EU. This has led to disputes over subsidies, environmental concerns, such as deforestation in the Amazon, and trade tariffs, with Western countries accusing Brazil of undercutting fair competition with lax environmental standards. As the world transitions into a new digital economy, technological innovation has become another critical area of rivalry between BRICS and G7 countries. The race for dominance in artificial intelligence, 5G, electric vehicles, and semiconductors is heating up, with BRICS nations, particularly China and India, making significant strides to challenge the technological supremacy of the West. China's 5G and tech expansion. China, through tech giants like Huawei, has become a global leader in 5G technology, directly competing with Western companies like Ericsson and Nokia. The U.S. has led efforts to block Huawei from Western markets, citing security concerns, while China has expanded its 5G infrastructure in BRICS and non-Western countries, challenging Western dominance in telecommunications. Artificial intelligence, AI, race. Both China and India are investing heavily in AI development, positioning themselves as key players in the fourth industrial revolution. The US and Europe have traditionally led in tech innovation, but China's aggressive push in AI, robotics, and quantum computing is challenging Silicon Valley's dominance. Electric vehicles, pity EVs. China has also overtaken the US and Europe in the electric vehicle market, with companies like BYD and NIO competing with Tesla and European automakers. This competition is reshaping the global automotive industry, with Western companies scrambling to catch up to China's dominance in battery production and EV manufacturing. The BRICS versus G7 rivalry is not only economic, but also deeply geopolitical. Both blocs are actively working to expand their global influence through strategic alliances. BRICS, with China and Russia at the forefront, is building partnerships across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, offering alternatives to the Western-led global order. Meanwhile, the G7 continues to strengthen its ties with NATO and other Western institutions to maintain its influence. China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, versus G7 infrastructure plans. China's BRI has drawn over 140 countries into its orbit, providing infrastructure investments in roads, ports, and digital networks. In response, the G7 has announced its own initiative, called the Build Back Better World B3W, to counter the influence of China's BRI. The race to control global infrastructure development is now a key aspect of the BRICS G7 rivalry, military alliances, Russia and China versus NATO. On the military front, BRICS powers like Russia and China are increasingly challenging NATO's dominance. While G7 nations are tightly aligned through NATO, BRICS countries are forming their own security pacts, with Russia and China conducting joint military exercises. This military competition, particularly in strategic regions like the South China Sea and Eastern Europe, adds another layer to the rivalry. Diplomatic outreach in Africa and Latin America. Both BRICS and G7 nations are competing for influence in Africa and Latin America, regions rich in natural resources and growing markets. BRICS nations, led by China's diplomatic and investment efforts, have made significant inroads, challenging traditional Western dominance in these regions. As BRICS and G7 continue to compete for economic, technological, and geopolitical supremacy, the world is witnessing the emergence of a new era of rivalry. The decisions made in Beijing, Moscow, Washington, and Brussels over the coming years will shape the future of global governance. Will BRICS's alternative vision challenge the G7's long-held dominance? Or will the Western-led global order adapt and endure? One thing is certain, the global balance of power is shifting, and the world will never be the same again. As of 2024, over 40 countries have expressed interest in joining BRICS or aligning themselves more closely with the group. Among the countries that have officially requested or shown a desire to join BRICS are Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Algeria, Indonesia, Mexico, Nigeria, Senegal, Bangladesh, Iran, and Ethiopia. Some of these countries, such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates, have already been invited to join as part of BRICS' 2023 expansion. This growing interest highlights the global appeal of BRICS as a platform for countries seeking economic independence from Western-dominated institutions and a stronger voice in global governance. As we witness this shift in global power, one thing is clear: BRICS is here to stay, and its influence will only grow. Whether this leads to a more balanced global order or greater competition between East and West remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: countries are rethinking their alliances, and the geopolitical landscape of the 21st century is evolving right before our eyes. Where do you see the future of global power heading? Where do you see the future of global power heading? Thank you for joining us on Pulseline Reports. Stay tuned as we continue to bring you the latest insights on the geopolitical shifts shaping our world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.